Hi everyone. Over the last couple of weeks, the thing that has really been on top of mind for everybody is this phenomenon of Hindutva terror, or what mistakenly was being called Hindu terror to begin with. I think there are a couple of things that are very important for us to engage with about this. First of all, the question of the label. To call it Hindu terror is really to mirror what has been a big sort of purge in Indian society in the last decade or so, which was the concept of Muslim terror or Islamist terrorists. And the obvious thing is that to paint an entire community with this kind of labeling, a sort of broad stroke identity is a terrifying prospect. It's not based in truth and is really a suicidal route for any society to go. So first of all, to put aside that label and to try and arrive at something which will define this. To a certain extent, even to call it Hindutva terror is a mistaken concept, because Hindutva is a contested idea. It has come to mean something in India's public life, is not necessarily what it means for everyone. And so it is important for us to locate these things in the correct vocabulary so that we don't alienate more people, we don't add to that phenomenon, we're able to look at it in the context that it should be looked at. So if really one were to give it a label today, one would use the more neutral tone of right-wing terrorism. And but there is, having said that, a more sinister aspect to understanding and to realizing that Hindutva right-wing groups have been involved in these terror attacks. And the reason that is so is because this is not terrorism arising out of grievance. It is not something that is being orchestrated by hostile neighbours, but something that is emanating from our own soil. It is also emanating from the idea of nationhood, which certain people hold. And that idea of nationhood really goes against the grain of anything that India can stand for. The genius of India today, the genius of India at the moment of birth, was that it went against every received notion of nationhood. It took plurality to be its raison d'etre. Most nations are formed on the idea of the hegemony of a particular community. India went against the grain of that received wisdom. The fact that India is able to absorb such extreme differences is because it understands that there is no other way that India can conceive of itself but as a nation that is built on plurality, a nation that is built on tolerance. And perhaps rightly, proponents of Hindutva say that in many ways the Hindu ethos, the ethos of Hinduism in its classical sense, has played a large role in creating this atmosphere of tolerance in India that we have always been proud of. But that is increasingly being changed into something else. There is another reason why right-wing terrorism arising out of Hindutva notions of nationhood is more dangerous than, say, even the idea of Islamist terrorism, is because it is backed by a much more politically strong organization. It is backed by something which has a political life in the nation, and is different from sort of just rump groups of aggrieved young Muslim boys, or, as I said earlier, something that is orchestrated by hostile neighbours. So we must look at this with a very even eye and understand it for being what it is. The curious thing is that when Sadhvi Pragya and Colonel Purohit were first arrested, at least for us at Tehelka, there was a genuine moral conundrum. For almost all of our journalistic existence as Tehelka, we had been casting stones on the ATS and on intelligence agencies and questioning their modus operandi for picking up Muslim boys, for trying to nail them based on police confessions. And then when these arrests happened, and because we are intrinsically opposed to any form of communalism, whether it's Islamic communalism or Hindutva communalism, one felt prone to believe them. But the conundrum was that how do you believe the same agencies that you were distrusting just a minute earlier? Increasingly now, the moral clarity on that has grown. We had doubts first. We did not immediately believe that Sadhvi Pragya and Colonel Purohit were involved in these things. But today, the mountain of evidence against them has grown, and the nature of evidence against them is completely different, largely from the nature of evidence that is usually mounted on the Muslim boys that have been picked up for terror attacks. The difference is that they have not been arrested based on post-facto police confessions. The evidence on which the ATS is acting is really the perpetrators themselves talking about their own deeds. They have tapes, they have audio tapes, they have videotapes of these people. People like R.P. Singh, the endocrinologist in Apollo Hospital, Colonel Purohit, talking about the major, talking about their own Sanghra Chalaks. And they're talking about not just vituperative hatred of Muslims, but about these acts, about planning them. Also, very crucially, a couple of years ago, Bajrang Dal workers died while making a bomb in an RSS worker's house. So these things are self-nailing. It is not based on police confessions. And that has brought a certain amount of moral clarity in believing that these people are genuinely involved and have been involved in these attacks. And that is something that allows us then to begin to analyze what it means for us to comprehend that there is something called a Hindutva terror network in India today. The interesting thing is that as more and more skeletons are falling out of the cupboard and evidence of a fairly widespread, to call it loosely, Hindutva terror network grows, at least for me there is a heartening sign which shows that the landscape of this country has changed. 4 years ago, when Sadhvi Pragya and Colonel Purohit were first arrested, both the BJP and the RSS had almost aggressively embraced them and brazenly said that they would stand up for them. They refused to believe that they were part of it. They said they would pay for their lawyers. Even somebody like Mr. Advani had spoken up for Sadhvi Pragya. Today, as more and more evidence grows, there is a heartening difference in the attitude. It is true that a few days ago, there were the RSS and its associate organizations attacked Headlines Today and its offices for even airing a story on Hindutva terror. But their reason was very different. They were denying that the RSS could even be connected with these people. Their anger was to be linked with these people. It wasn't a brazen embracing of the communal idea. They wanted to be distant from the communal idea. And that is true even of the BJP's fairly, distasteful attack on Congress leaders like Digvijay Singh. It is not an embracing of the communal idea, but a sense of wanting to be distanced from it. Interesting thing, which again shows how much the Indian landscape has shifted, is that today many of the people and the political parties and organizations that came to power on the wings of the communal idea now want to divest themselves from that very past. Even somebody like Narendra Modi has spent considerable energy trying to divest himself, trying to distance himself from the Gujarat riots, from his clarion calls on Sohrabuddin, which were all the things that really brought him into power 4 or 5 years ago. Interestingly, today, when his Home Minister Amit Shah is increasingly, the news around him is growing, and the evidence about him being involved in the false encounters against Sohrabuddin and Tulsi Prajapati are growing, Narendra Modi wants to distance himself from it. What all of this points to is that something has shifted in the Indian landscape. The communal idea no longer has the kind of cachet that it had, not political cachet, not cachet amongst even the disenfranchised young. People are really hungry for something else. And astutely, political parties have understood that. Their ear is to the ground and the communal idea is very much waning. So that is something that is heartening. What is also heartening is to realize that many of the Muslim boys that have been picked up, even for the very attacks, for the Malegaon attacks, for the Ajmer Sharif attacks, boys like Bhatkal who were picked up, are increasingly proven to be innocent. The courts are beginning to let them off. And all of that points to extremely positive things in Indian society. The fact that there was a kind of, frenzy that had whipped up around Islamic terrorism, even that is on the wane. And it is proof again and again that extremities can only go so far in a plural society like India. And then there is something intrinsic in the society which brings it back to sanity. And I think that is a heartening thought that we can live with as evidence of this continues to depress us. See you guys in a few weeks.